Track limits have been shaping Formula 1 races for decades, deciding wins, losses, and even championship outcomes. From simple rules to prevent corner cutting to high-tech monitoring and gravel traps, track limits have always been more than just lines on the tarmac. Today, we'll explore how track limits started in 1950, evolved through kerbs and sensors, caused chaos in 2023, and how F1 is fixing them in 2025. By the end, you see why the track limits have such a huge impact on every race, and why over 1,200 violations were recorded at just one Grand Prix in 2023. But to fully understand track limits, we have to go back to the very start of Formula 1 in 1950. The FIA introduced track limits to make racing fair and safe. The idea was simple. If a driver cut a corner or went off the track, they could gain an unfair advantage, so rules were needed to stop that. Back then, enforcement was old school. Manual observation was the only way to catch someone cheating, which meant mistakes were sometimes missed, but it was better than nothing. Track limits mattered because without them, a clever shortcut could cost a rival several seconds, potentially changing the race outcome. But as drivers got faster and cars more precise, FIA had to find ways to make track limits physically enforceable. There were some barriers already, but they needed stronger ways to stop drivers from cutting corners. Even tiny shortcuts or going slightly off the track could give drivers a big advantage. Enter kerbs. By the early 2000s, the FIA started using new physical barriers to enforce track limits. Sausage kerbs were introduced in 2002 and fully implemented by 2010. These bumpy, sometimes dangerous kerbs were designed to punish drivers who went too wide, making it uncomfortable or risky to exceed limits. One extreme example came in 2019 during a Formula 3 race. Alexander Peroni had a really bad crash after hitting the kerbs, showing how dangerous these barriers could be. Drivers who clipped kerbs sometimes suffered injuries, highlighting the fine line between enforcing rules and keeping people safe. Over the years, the FIA experimented with different approaches to reduce penalties and keep racing flowing, while still ensuring drivers respected track limits. Even with kerbs in place, it wasn't about drivers trying to cheat. The goal was to prevent constant violations and the problems they caused, and these improvements set the stage for smarter track limit solutions in the future. But before we dive into the new solutions, it's important to see how technology shaped the enforcement of track limits. Over time, technology became the new referee. Sensors, cameras, and telemetry allowed race control to track every wheel of every car. But even with technology, enforcing track limits wasn't without its challenges. Race control had to make tough calls, sometimes deciding between mere centimeters. The penalty system was straightforward but brutal. After 3 warnings, drivers were shown a black and white flag to signal that another track limit violation would lead to a penalty. The 4th violation meant a 5-second penalty, the 5th 10-second. And then there were deleted laps, moments where a driver's perfect lap could be erased after careful analysis. Drivers often found it frustrating because it was hard to know exactly when their tires had gone too far. Fans too felt cheated when the fastest lap they just witnessed vanished from the leaderboard. It might seem unfair at first glance, but understanding the history shows why these rules exist. Track limits aren't about ruining races, they're about keeping competition fair. Still, all this monitoring sometimes made racing feel more about following rules than just racing fast. Even commentators and engineers had to focus on the data as much as the action on track. In addition, by 2023, track limits had become very strict. Even the tiniest overstep could lead to penalties. The Austrian Grand Prix that year recorded over 1,200 track limit violations alone, a staggering number that left drivers and fans shaking their heads. Season-wide, laps were deleted regularly, often affecting qualifying results or race positions. Even fastest lap points were stripped for minimal tire oversteps. It reached a point where strategy and skill were sometimes overshadowed by the fear of crossing a boundary on the track. Fans complained, drivers grumbled, and social media exploded with debates about fairness. Still, this wasn't the first time F1 faced such a dilemma. The sport has been balancing fairness and excitement for decades. Track limits weren't invented to punish drivers. They were there to protect the sport from shortcuts and unsafe racing. But it was clear that a new, smarter approach was needed to enforce track limits more naturally. Discussions around rule reform gained momentum, and the teams had to figure out how to respect limits without ruining racing lines. Luckily, F1 finally made a big change in 2025. Gravel traps replaced constant penalties in key areas. The idea is simple: if a driver goes wide, they hit gravel, naturally slowing down without the need for a penalty. This allows racing to feel more real and less interrupted by deleted laps. But of course, it's not without challenges. On the plus side, racing is smoother and more exciting. Fans see drivers push to the edge without being punished all the time. But there are risks. Gravel can hit drivers, as happened with Isaac Hadjar in Hungary, and cleaning delays can disrupt races. Some circuits also host multiple racing series, like MotoGP, where gravel could be dangerous. Even with these challenges, the new system is a significant improvement. The constant fear of deleted laps is gone, and races feel more natural. Drivers can push the limits while still respecting the boundaries, and fans enjoy cleaner, more thrilling action. Engineers and strategists have also welcomed the change, since it allows racing to be better yet fair. The solution isn't perfect, but it's a massive step forward. Combining history, technology, and clever track design, F1 is finally letting racing feel like racing again. In addition, the 2025 changes to track limits have also affected fans. Races now feel more exciting because drivers can go wide without having laps deleted. Fans notice closer battles and fewer interruptions, which makes the action on track more thrilling and easier to follow. Overall, the new system has improved both the racing and the viewing experience. But these changes haven't just affected viewers, teams have had to adapt as well. Engineers now consider suspension, tires, and aerodynamics to handle the edges of track safely. Even small adjustments in car setup can make a big difference when a driver approaches gravel. Track limits have always been about more than just rules. They shape the way cars are designed, how drivers race, and how fans experience the sport. From flags and curbs to high-tech monitoring and gravel traps, each change has aimed to safety, fairness, and excitement. Ultimately, track limits are about balance, keeping racing fair while letting drivers push to their limits. They remind us that in Formula 1, even small adjustments in rules can change the way the sport is experienced on and off the track.